Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I see that still people are joining, but in respect of the time, we only got 1 hour. I suggest we start. So again, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome at the Sustainable Apparel Coalition session at the OECD Due Diligence Forum. My name is Esther Germans. I'm the Director Stakeholder Engagement and Partnerships at the SAC. And I'm really looking forward to moderating this session on how transparency can accelerate progress towards a sustainable sector. I think it's very clear to everyone that great progress has been made over the last couple of years on transparent reporting. We see more and more brands and factories, but also sustainability organizations that put out data on environment and labor performance in the public domain. And this data is used by consumers to make more informed choices about what they buy and what they wear. But it also is used by industry actors and NGOs to push for better, faster, and more sustainable improvements. Within this trend, the SAC also launched its transparency program last year. And in this session, we will discuss with industry leaders how transparency is driving behavioral change, and not only amongst consumers, but also within brands and manufacturers. We will be starting this session with a presentation about the SAC's transparency program, followed by a panel discussion. Due to different time zone of the panelists, we had to pre-record the panel, but the Q&A towards the end of the session will be live. So please share your questions through the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will take them at the end of the session and try to answer them all. And of course, you can always reach out to us for any follow-up question. But now I would like to introduce my colleagues, Chris Marshall and Sophia Ellis, who lead the implementation of the SAC's transparency program and will share with you initial results, but also plans for the program's further rollout. So Chris and Sophia, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's really exciting for us to be here with you today to take the next 15, 20 minutes to walk you through these 4 things. So over our time together, I hope that we can help speak to why transparency is important, our approach here at the SAC to solving this problem, and show you guys some of the work we've done so far, some of the work that's going to come ahead. And then I'm going to hand it over to Sophia, and she's going to talk through the goals and the theory of change around the program. So why transparency is important? Well, I think if you've spent your time, precious time, watching us today, it's pretty apparent that you're engaged in this conversation. So I usually go into a bit of a diatribe here around why transparency is important, but in this case, I'll keep it short. But what I would like to say is that we're at this really pivotal moment, I think, in regards to transparency within the industry. You have all of these let's say forces kind of converging at this particular moment. You have the consumer who is becoming more educated and also curious around where their product is coming from, how it's being made, and who is making it. You have governance, not only specifically here in the EU, but across the entire world, which is driving this conversation forward. You have technology, which has come, really far over the past 3 years. We have new measurement tools, but on top of that, we also have, traceability solutions as well. And then of course you have the brands themselves, right? Who are resourced up, they're engaged in the conversation, and they're ready to drive transparency forward. And to quote, I think it's a really good time to quote our executive director, Amina, it's like, transparency in itself is not the end game, but it's a critical step for transforming the industry and establishing a new era of accountability. And our answer to this at the SAC is to leverage the wealth of data that we have within the Higg Index. Now, if you don't know the Higg Index, it's our technology arm. It's our software provider, which provides performance data across the entire supply chain. Our goal here at the SAC is to create a framework, right? To provide a consistent way for brands, retailers, and manufacturers to be able to communicate their sustainability performance or information on the apparel and footwear products that they're making. Now, our vision is of a global consumer industry that gives more than it takes to the planet and to its people. And alongside our key stakeholders, our staff, of course, our members, we developed this robust plan of attack, much more information than goes behind this slide itself, around these 4 pillars. These 4 pillars are the things that are going to be driving the SAC forward that we find important. And what's interesting here is you can see how important we find transparency is. In fact, it's one of our 4 pillars. It actually touches upon all 4 of the pillars themselves. And with any strategic plan, it requires choice, right? And what's for sure is transparency is our choice. It's the industry's choice, and despite it being a buzzword for the past couple of years, I think it's something that we've always been thinking about. We've always anticipated, the suite of tools that are kind of measuring and guiding internal practices to be leveraged for external comms, and that's where we're at this particular moment. So if I think about the transparency vision itself, so what is the world that we want to see here at the SAC when we shut our eyes and we look down the path, the end of 2025, we have this goal of 100% of SAC members have public-facing ratings of their sustainability performance that are comparable, that are credible, that are trustable, and that are actionable, right? Quite a lofty goal for sure. But I think considering where the conversation is right now and how fast it's sped up over the past, say, half year, I think this is completely doable. And when we think about transparency within the SAC, there's 3 different types of claims that we're kind of covering, and they're all kind of identified in this simple pyramid in front of you. So at the bottom of the pyramid is probably the easiest. It's that self-declared, claim that you're using the Higg Index as a measurement tool internally. You're telling your audience that this is how you're guiding your management practices in regards to sustainability. The middle part of the pyramid, which is probably the most popular right now, is a claim we're calling the self-disclosed performance claim according to industry standards. So this could be a claim, say, for example, a facility which would want to speak to their overall FEM score, so the facility environmental module score out of the Higg Index, so one of these measurement tools, and expressing that overall score to their audience. And we have communication guidelines which can help do so. And the final part is the top part of this pyramid, and this is where we're going to spend probably the majority of the rest of the presentation on, is something we're calling a verified comparative performance claim. And this is really specific to a single product, right? So this goes through the rigor of our verification protocol. It goes through our methodology itself. And here I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. So this is where I start to get excited, because finally you get to see how this comes to life, right? Enough context, Chris. Now I want to know what are you guys planning? So on the right-hand side here, you have, in its simplest form, a mock-up of any particular brand's website and e-commerce page, and one specific product detail page itself. In the bottom right-hand corner, you see a scorecard. A scorecard which measures the overall environmental footprint of this particular product as it relates to product design intent. So leveraging data we're getting from the Material Sustainability Index or the product module, but also looking at the cohort of facilities that have manufactured this particular product and their environmental practices, also the social labor practices within those facilities themselves, and of course, all the corporate responsibility that is behind the brand that has actually created this product, so measuring their brand practices as well. So giving you that full holistic picture of the overall environmental impact of this particular product. And like, this is honestly, this is what we feel it could be the future of how consumers are going to be informed before they purchase, right? And I guess the most comparable moment to this moment would be in the early 90s when food labels were introduced into the industry. And previous to that, no one had really any idea how much or what they were consuming. Right. And to this day, maybe you don't understand your overall level of sugar intake or your daily intake of sugar. But you know that 4 grams is probably too little and 28 grams is too much. So you have a good idea of the scale. And I think that's where we're going with our solution, right? So by no means is the SAC trying to create let's say the food label for the fashion industry. But what we are offering is an off-the-shelf tools, right? Offering these three points. So one thing is a methodology to help you complete your claims. Another thing we're offering is the comms guidelines to help you write those claims and express them to your audience. And then finally, what we're offering is the traceability requirements to help you substantiate all those claims. So what we've done is we've taken a layered approach in terms of how we are delivering the sustainability information, right? So we wanted to build a solution which could speak to an array of audience, depending on where they are in terms of their interest or education in sustainability. So what you saw on the previous slide could be your layer 1, right? That 2-second PDP view. I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. What is the overall footprint of this product before I go ahead and purchase it, all the way down to layer 3, which is what we're calling, or deemed call, a full sustainability profile, which gives you a breakdown of the specific impact categories like fossil fuel usage, water pollution, water usage, global warming potential. You can also click into, and see more information around the methodology that we're using. Also, all of the background data we've used to compute the claim. So it's really giving this program the credibility it needs to have to stand up in this space where we do see an array of misleading claims. So this is where the part where I just want to stop and congratulate this group of brands, because they've been with us at the beginning of this journey. They continue to be with us. And, it takes a lot of courage to step into this space and start to become transparent with your supply chain practices. So we're really excited to be working with this group of brands. And, I'll be really humble and honest. It's been a wonderful learning curve, right? We are seeing improvements along the way. We're very much in pilot phase, but we're scaling up. So we're seeing more products go through the program, cohort after cohort. And just finishing off with a couple slides here. So I've showed you an array of mock-ups. I just wanted to give you one example of it live, a quick demo of an organic t-shirt on a Tommy Hilfiger website. So here on the right-hand side, all of this green information is the methodology itself, which we're deeming layer 1. So giving your overall rating of the impact of this particular product. You can click in. Here's that sustainability profile that I talked about. You can also get more details around the methodology that we're using at this moment. So, it's quite a journey ahead of us. We're at phase 1. We just started May 27th last year. We launched the first phase of the transparency program, specifically looking at the overall material impact. The next phase of this, so the next part of that scorecard that you saw in the mock-up is going to be all around the facility environmental practices. We're going to start creating the methodology around the brand practices in 2022, and it's going to be bookended by the social labor practices and the product module, which will give us that full overall cradle to grave impact footprint of any particular product. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sophia to talk through some of the goals for this particular program.
Thank you, Chris. So Chris has outlined our why behind the transparency program and the practical elements. And in this section, I want to go a little bit deeper on the goals of the program and how it relates to our theory of change, demonstrating to you why transparency can be considered as a lever for accelerated progress. So as you could tell from Chris, the Higg Index Transparency Program was developed to provide the industry with a unified, consistent, and science-based way to publicly share product-level sustainability performance. As a coalition, we cannot make those claims ourselves. We can only encourage our member to do so and facilitate those communications. And this is why facilitation is our primary goal for the program. Next slide, please. And one that we can see as serving both society and our members. By leveraging the common language from the Higg Index suite of tools, which we have been developing for the past 10 years, companies will be able to consistently communicate product sustainability claims to consumers in a data-driven way. By creating these forms of disclosures to the public, organizations can embrace accountability identifying themselves as leaders in this space. And they can do this by sharing progress or uncovering opportunities. Upon this, society is in theory empowered to understand and express their expectations and be better informed to make decisions based on the actual data that they see. And this is important because according to research, 55% of consumers in the US, for example, wish to purchase what they deem as more sustainable clothing, but 42% of those don't know what that means or what to look for. If we could move to the first slide on facilitation as a goal, I can share that our indicator for this goal is aligned to our mission. If done correctly, this will result in 100% of our members sharing public-facing ratings of sustainability performance that are comparable, credible, and actionable by the year 2025. Moving forward to, now we see the facilitation goal. Just to reiterate, our indicator for that goal is aligned to our mission of 100% of members sharing public-facing claims of sustainability performance. Now moving to the second goal of compliance. While we never want transparency to become a tick-the-box exercise for organizations, the truth is that we have to consider the evolving landscape of global policy and guidance around us. We have the goal to ensure that users are on the correct side of legislative compliance, in line with international developments to combat greenwashing and promote due diligence. A huge investment of time and effort has and continues to be invested in ensuring that the Higg suite of tools is reinforcing legislation and guidance, which is important to the industry. One example of this is how the Higg brand and retail module for 2022, which assesses different life cycle stages in a product as it goes through a company's or operations, is actually a reinforcement of the OECD due diligence guidelines. Therefore, in theory, if a brand completes the rigorous levels of questioning with this module, they have completed an assessment aligned with the values of the due diligence guidelines, potentially highlighting areas of risk and need of attention. One second example, which Chris touched upon, is the product module. Our aim is that when we integrate the product module into the transparency program, it will be aligned with the EU product environmental footprinting methods. And our indicator for this goal is, if done correctly, the program outputs will fulfill global policy and guidance as it evolves. Moving on to our last goal of the program, and this one is perhaps the most powerful, so I will give you an example. I personally think that we've had a lot of inspiring conversations with members in the program. However, for me, the best example came from a member who was not even yet a current participant. From the get-go in our first meeting, these people were engaged with the message of transparency and full of tangible examples of how they can see the adoption of transparency and improved traceability processes as challenging the status quo within their organization. And this is what we mean when we say promotion of internal systems of change. It is boundless in its opportunity. It can range from a participant having to establish new projects around the provenance of their materials. It can encourage improved design and sourcing decisions in the development studio, and it can culminate in more impact-led decision-making. So narrowing back down to our goal, if done correctly, we believe that there will be improved design and sourcing decisions which are comparable across the marketplace. Now, to address the question at the core of this presentation, how can transparency be considered as a lever for accelerated progress? The program is built upon our theory of change that embracing transparency can have upon the industry. And it all begins with the establishment of a common language to discuss impacts and enable comparability. Leveraging the language from the Higg Index suite of tools gives us that base to start inviting people to the conversation. From manufacturers to brands and retailers, consumers and policymakers alike. I already spoke to why we believe facilitating these communications can demonstrate progress or highlight opportunity in a scientific way. And the result of this, we believe, will be increasing consumer trust. While this is not something which anyone can solve overnight, we have recognized that impact disclosures must be verified in order to be effective. In these early days of our program, we are already seeing encouraging results from testing, and very much hope that this trend continues. So with these conditions of language, facilitation, and trust in place, we believe that action in the industry will follow. Transitioning to increasingly impact-led decision-making will see more investment in sustainability initiatives and greater response to policy. And promisingly, we already see the seeds of this idea taking root, inspired by our program. Finally, the message of transparency is so powerful that we are already enabling competitors to come together as a community, working side by side to overcome problems and learn from each other. And with this level of partnership, we believe that transparency can accelerate our efforts to achieve our vision, a global apparel and footwear industry that gives more than it takes to the planet and its people. So thank you for your attention. We truly hope that you stay connected to our journey as we develop and leverage transparency for progress. And next, we very much wanted to share with you specific voices from the industry for our panel discussion. While this meant that we had to pre-record the panel prior to today, we're still very pleased to share this special conversation with you now.
Introduce to you Måwe, Director Stakeholder Engagement, Gore, Rakhil Hirdaramani, from the Director from the Hirdaramani Group, and Delphine Williot, Policy and Research Officer within the Fashion Revolution. Welcome, all of you. We just heard great insight about why SAC has launched its transparency program, the purpose and the theory of change behind this. Let's check in this panel what the reality is telling us. And let me start with a question for Rakhil. Your company, Hirdaramani Group, a leading manufacturer that puts sustainability at the core of its operations, how do you see that the SAC's transparency program and potentially transparency in general is driving change within your group in support of sustainability targets? And yeah, maybe you can explain what it is that you are doing differently thanks to transparency.
Sure. Thank you, Esther. Great question. And, we had a terrific presentation from Chris and Sophia, and it reminded me of a quote from W.E. Deming, William Edwards Deming. Without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And it really summarizes what we were as a manufacturer. At Hirdaramani, our value system is very strong. And one of our key values is make things better. We have a responsibility to multiple stakeholders within our industry, whether it's the brands we work with or collaborate with, our workforce, but also our community that we're involved in, where our factories are located. So we've been members of the SEC since 2013, and we were one of the first manufacturing users of the Higg Index. And data is really what's provided us with insights. We were already doing a lot on the sustainability front, but it wasn't organized or structured. By being able to benchmark scores, we're actually able to see how we're performing, and it helps formulate our plans on how we move forward. So we actually used a lot of SAC's policy and scores from the Higg Index to see how we move forward to 2025, where we launch our Future First sustainability strategy. We built it on people, planet, and product, and in that specific order, because as I mentioned, we have a responsibility to all our associates. In addition to that, we also believe in the accountability, and having that public scorecard that Chris alluded to means we know how we can improve and get better. We've committed to signing up to the Higg FEM Level 2, FEM Level 2 by 2023, and looking at a score of more than 80 for all our facilities by 2025. It actually gives us a goal to work towards and allows us to build a structured plan. But the key is we're in a connected business with multiple stakeholders all through the supply chain, going right down to the farmers' fields when it comes to cotton. And the only way we can truly be sustainable is by sharing information in an open environment and making sure everyone in the supply chain is connected.
Thank you, Rakhil. I guess this is what we aim for at the SAC, and very happy to hear how improved and better data in the public domain is helping to drive change within your own company. Maybe now turning to Marie. Gore has defined transparency as one of its 3 sustainability principles. What do you think is necessary for transparency to deliver on its impact and truly transform Gore's practices as well as that of other manufacturers and buyers? Can you share your views and your experience based on the position that you have right now?
Yes, so first of all, we think that systems such as the Higg are so powerful because they try to capture the broader picture. In the past, data collection was sometimes about, cherry picking what was the best, what did you do well. But when you have such a system that is so broad, you cannot cherry pick. You have to look at the whole picture. And you start also, that means that you have to look at the bad pieces and you start questioning that data and you start digging into your supply chain or your practices, and you then try to find solutions. So that's what we think is so good. But some of the problems that we see at the same time is that we work for hundreds of brands, and they all then may have different systems, and we receive a lot of data requests, and this is very time consuming, time that could be used better, ideally, to focus on the work to improve. So having a common system or comparable system to avoid this data and audit fatigue is something that we see is crucial to transparency. And Higg presents one of these tools that we see has a lot of potential. And then we also think that data, sometimes we focus too much on the data, and data, it drives change because it creates accountability, but it's not enough to collect the data. Obviously, data is a call for action. So, and for really improvement, we need collaboration. So what we would like this to lead to a stronger dialogue within the industry and between partners, industry partners, on how we can collectively improve. We have seen a lot of one-way communications in the past where brands ask manufacturers for data, but we hope that this will change and become a two-way dialogue. And then one last piece would also be that having that comparability is crucial, and for that it needs to be verified. So we think that there shouldn't be any loopholes. We cannot compare self-reported data to verified data. So creating that verification across the line would be also crucial.
Excellent, thanks, Marie. And maybe building on what you're talking about and what Rakhil just also mentioned, the interconnectedness of the industry, the push to convergence around same methodology, the same reporting structures, and creating possibilities for collective action and industry-wide action. Rakhil, how do you see that transparency impacts the relationship between brands and manufacturers? All the things that you mentioned and that Marie just mentioned around connecting, convergence, collective action, what is showing up in the industry?
So, I firmly echo Marie's statement, and I was smiling away because it's true. It's at present, it's a one-way street, right? Let's be honest. And transparency cannot just be limited to environment and labor issues or purely product. We also need to look at how do we have the difficult conversations? How do we look at fair pricing? If we look at the environment today, we see rising raw material prices, rising freight prices. But as manufacturers, we're the last link in the chain. So what gets squeezed first are cut and make costs. And these are the conversations we need to have, because the business needs to be sustainable throughout the supply chain. We need to make sure that farmers are paid the right wages. as much as manufacturers. And we are seeing price inflation, but that's primarily due to availability challenges or raw material challenges or freight challenges. But the truth of the matter is inflation is not just limited to the markets where our products are retailed. It needs to be an overall conversation and a dialogue. I think, it's, like I said, it's a mixed bag. We've seen a lot of brands do the right thing and great work there, partnering with not just your organization, but Fairtrade USA, 1% for the Planet, and really collaborating with manufacturers to make sure that they can, that we're around for the foreseeable future. And I think if we continue to have those conversations, the supply chain gets stronger. The fact that we're able to perform, where we have the conversation about scorecards. Well, I think that scorecard needs to work both ways. And we're obviously eagerly awaiting the brand and retail module, but a lot of work with the Better Buying organization as well to see how business practices are evolved. And some of our partners are taking note and listening to the issues we face.
Thanks, Rakhil. That is, I guess, a good and a clear message that progress is being made and progress needs to be made. Last question for you for now, Marie. Based on your experience, again, within Gore and the industry, what piece of advice would you give to other manufacturers and brands to embrace transparency as really an opportunity to deliver on sustainability targets and also harmonize the industry and support increased collaboration and convergence?
So first of all, I would give the advice to use some tools that is commonly used, because using a common tool, you avoid as much as possible this data fatigue that is just time consuming. Second of all, these broad tools such as the Higg Index are so powerful, exactly as I said before, because you get the broader picture of your strengths and weaknesses. And this is crucial if you want to focus on what really matters to sustainability and to the world, to people. You have to be able to see the whole picture, and these tools can help you understand what you need to do. And also, obviously, be honest. If you take a tool such as Higg, where you get points for the improvement, you may want to really start where you are, because then you also get better scores in that sense. But what it maybe is the most important piece of advice is that transparency and how we should be seen as an opportunity to have a more in-depth conversation with the customers that you have. We have to quit that one-way communication and instead look at, many brands don't understand the complexities and the difficulties behind some of the problems. And this is an opportunity to actually start a dialogue about that. What are the problems behind, and how can we collaboratively, as partners, try to improve these issues? So that you have a shared responsibility and these trusted strategic partnerships is what you need to have strong and secure business relations. So that's an opportunity. Transparency is an opportunity to actually create that.
Thanks, Marie. And I guess from an SAC perspective, we are clearly aligned and want to be part and facilitate, as Sophia just said, that partnership in the industry. So now turning to Delphine, you're of course working for the fashion revolution, which has a very important role to play when it comes to transparency in the sector. You've been actively advocating for that since the inception of the fashion revolution and the Rana Plaza collapse. And according to my knowledge, I think it was 2020 that the fashion revolution published the Fashion Transparency Index for the first time, but you can correct me if that's wrong. But the question is, how do you see that transparency is part of the systemic and structural change that fashion revolution aims to see in the industry? And could you also maybe share your views on how SAC's transparency program fits within this trend?
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant question. Thank you very much, Esther. So as you mentioned, so transparency is foundational to achieving systemic change, and it's also being part of our organization and a key aspect of our organization since 2014. So we strongly believe that transparency really underpins the transformative change. But as we know, unfortunately, across the fashion value chain, there's a lot of opaqueness, which means that if you cannot see what actually happens across your supply chain, you cannot fix it. So we believe that transparency is the first step, but it's not radical. It's just a necessary first step. So this is why we created the Fashion Transparency Index, which was first published in 2017. And it reviews and ranks 250 of the world's largest brands and retailers according to what they publicly disclose on their human rights and environmental policies, practices, and impact. So through the Fashion Transparency Index, what we do is we cover a wide range of indicators. So we cover, I think, about over 230 indicators on human rights and environmental due diligence, forced labor, biodiversity, hazardous chemicals, gender equality, living wages, and so on. And the reason we try to cover as many topics is because we know that there is a huge lack of transparency on all these different indicators across the supply chain. So one thing that we will say, though, is that transparency is not to be confused with sustainability. And that is one thing that we really try to explain to our followers, to our readers, and to anyone we work with. But without transparency, you cannot achieve a sustainable, accountable, and fair fashion industry. So ultimately, as I mentioned, you really need to have visibility across your entire supply chain in order to truly address these key issues. So we also believe that the public disclosure of credible, comprehensive, and comparable information really allows different stakeholders, whether it's lawmakers, journalists, NGOs, trade unions, and even workers, to truly scrutinize what brands are actually publicly disclosing and hold them accountable on their policies, their impacts, because if they do not disclose anything, you can't actually go after them and say, hold on a minute, you've claimed this, but in reality, we found on the ground that the reality was completely untrue. And this also allows for, as Marie mentioned, greater collaboration to seize and to mitigate and prevent environmental and human rights abuses, and really come together to collaborate and share strategies and best practices across the industry. So one thing that we found through our research, for instance, is that the further you go down the supply chain, the less information you're able to find. So for instance, we found that 47% of brands disclose their tier 1 suppliers, yet only 11% of them disclose their raw material level. Again, you can see that that's a huge gap, and that's 250 of the world's largest brands. And we can see similar trends across environmental indicators. So 31% of brands publish annual water footprint in their company's own and operated facilities, yet only 5% of brands and retailers publish annual water footprint at fiber production and or raw material level. Again, you can see that there's a huge gap of transparency as well. In addition to this, there's a lack of standardization when it comes to classifying what constitutes like a sustainable material. So we found as well that 44% of brands disclose a time-bound strategy on sustainable materials, that yet only 30% actually disclose what tools or what processes they're using to classify what a sustainable material is. Again, that's a huge issue within the industry. And one last issue that we found is that brands massively rely on extrapolated data rather than actual data from their facility. So we have seen that benchmarking and through our Fashion Transparency Index, being able to rank brands on their disclosure ultimately pushes them to disclose more information, as they will want to compete against other brands in order to really remain a leader within their category. That SAC brands will publish will ultimately inform what we use in order to create our own reports as well. As we really believe that if brands are incentivized to disclose more information on their environmental impacts and this information is disclosed, it means not only that the information is reliable, but it also means that it allows for greater scrutiny from all their stakeholders, and ultimately it allows for greater accountability at all levels.
Thanks, Delphine. I mean, clearly there are still lots of challenges, and transparency, the transparency initiatives demonstrating your work of the Fashion Revolution demonstrate or give more clarity of what those challenges are. Could you also maybe share where do you see progress happening, and what gives you hope?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way Fashion Revolution works is that we advocate for greater transparency and ultimately change on 3 levels. So on one hand, we've got cultural change through greater citizens and consumer awareness. We advocate for industry change by engaging with the different brands who are taking part in the Fashion Transparency Index. And we also advocate for legislation change through campaigning and lobbying and so on. So from an industry perspective, what we're seeing is greater level of disclosure on suppliers lists. So from the first time we produced our Fashion Transparency Index, only 32% of brands were producing their or disclosing their tier 1 lists, whereas at the moment we're at 47% in 2021. What we're also seeing is a greater level of engagement from brands. So now we're able to have direct conversations with brands in order to push them to disclose more information publicly. And we're also getting more interest from investors who also want to use our data in order to inform their investment decisions. So ultimately, we still see that the current average score in our transparency index is 23%, which is ultimately still fairly low. But having said this, we also believe that the Fashion Transparency Index has also helped provide greater transparency when it comes to the luxury sector. As for the first time ever, one thing that we used to hear from luxury brands is, oh, we cannot disclose where our suppliers are because ultimately this would impact our competitiveness. For the first time, we see that some luxury brands are actually disclosing their tier 1 suppliers list. So that's a really positive first step as well. From a legislation perspective, 10 years ago, there was barely no conversation around regulating brands, whereas now we're seeing more and more regulation coming into place, whereas whether it's the garment workers legislation in LA, whether it's NYC and the Fashion Act that we're seeing coming into place as well. And finally, the EU MHR EDD, which is going to be published, I'm hoping next week. And we're really hoping to leverage this as part of our work. And lastly, we're also seeing greater interest on transparency from consumers and from citizens themselves. So they really want to know who made their clothes, in what conditions, and the overall impact of these. So one thing that has been fairly untapped within the industry is the power of the citizen to change the fashion industry. And we're really hoping to leverage greater engagement in order to launch our upcoming campaign on living wages, where we'll submit a legal proposal to the European Commission and hope to gain support from 1 million EU citizens in order to implement due diligence legislation at EU level for any fashion brand and retailer wanting to sell their products within the EU. Nevertheless, we know that the current climate has deepened existing power imbalances. So this is really something that we're really trying to address through our living wage campaign, Good Clothes Fair Pay.
Thanks, Delphine. I mean, I guess listening to you and how you describe how Fashion Revolution started and where the conversation about transparency was, actually a lot of things have changed. There are clearly challenges ahead of us, but also quite a couple of things that give us hope. Now, this panel is about how can we accelerate change, and between 2014 and 2022, where we are now, there's 8 years. Change has been slow, picking up, important. For the 3 of you, could you give one piece of advice to the SAC on how we can accelerate change through our transparency program? Is there one piece of advice that you could give us that we can take on board in the further rollout of our program? And Marie, maybe I start with you.
apologies. So yes, so we see there is a great opportunity for the SAC to really align the industry beyond all these, singular initiatives popping up, and we are really committed to this. And if I would say one thing, then I would repeat what I said earlier, namely, let's make sure that we create, beyond the data collection, this crucial dialogue between industry partners and underscore that the data is a call for action for collective for this collective action and collective improvement, so to say. And if I may say a second thing, I also believe that we need to have very close integration of the Higg tools to make sure that improvements are actually visible on products, because that would also spur more action and motivate to drive change. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. That's very useful. And Rakhil, one or potentially two suggestions from your side.
I think the first would be get as many members of the supply chain on board as possible. A single platform with standardized data allows us to combat data fatigue, as Marie mentioned. But my key push is obviously the two-way conversation and making sure both sides are evaluated. Well, all sides are evaluated of the supply chain.
Thanks, Rakhil. The last word is for you, Delphine. What suggestion do you have for us?
I'm going to slightly echo what Rakhil said about onboarding as many partners as possible. We really feel that in order to have a level playing field within the industry, we absolutely need to get as many brands involved. And the last thing I will say as well is use competitive tendencies. Ultimately, there are huge financial advantages to using the same type of methodology, because if you have comparable data, ultimately you can showcase how you're a leader within your own industry. And I think that's a huge asset for the SAC's program, is ultimately really showcasing that by following the new program, you're able also to become a leader within it.
Excellent. Those were beautiful last words that we will definitely take on board. And we also hope that you stay on board in working with us and with other industry partners to make sure that transparency is actually delivering the impact that we are hoping for. So thank you very much for joining us in this panel. Again, thank you very much for your great contributions, and we look forward to continue working with you.
Thank you so much, Esther.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Excellent. Of course, for me, Chris and Sophia, this is not the first time that we saw it, but we found it very, very useful. I hope you enjoyed this conversation too, and you found it useful. You can bring back some of the learnings and insights to your own organization, your own business. We do have, so we are very grateful for that panel, and we already thank them, of course. We do have a couple of minutes left for Q&A, and we are, in addition to Chris and Sophia, we also have with us Bente Bauer, who's working at the Policy Hub for any policy-related question that comes up. Again, we have 10 minutes. We hope to get through as many questions as possible. But if one of your questions did not get addressed, or you have questions that you want to reach out to us directly, please do so. You can reach Chris, the director of the Transparency Program, at chris@apparelcoalition.org. You can reach me too as well, Esther@apparelcoalition.org. So all in all, if you know our first name, you will be able to reach us, first name @apparelcoalition.org. Good. So maybe Chris, first question, I guess would be good if you could take a look at that one, is how is the Higg Index Transparency Program different from other transparency programs? Can you explain?
Great. Yeah, great question. Yeah, because you're going to see more and more environmental footprint calculators popping up in this space. I think what we're really proud of, I think, are these three principles. The first, actually, I think Delphine kind of touched on it a bit. There's around like the consistent way that we're evaluating and disclosing. So no matter what brand you are, a retailer, like everyone has to follow the same evaluation criteria. So that makes it really easy to compare across different products within one brand, but also very easy to compare from one brand to the next. So consistency, I think, is the first one. It's truly comprehensive. That would be the second principle. Although we started with something that's very familiar, we're focusing on raw materials and the overall environmental footprint of those raw materials of the products that we're claiming that are going through the program. Over the next 2 years, we're going to expand that to also take into account facility environmental practices, social labor practices, like we said, and all the brand practices as well. So again, giving you a truly holistic picture of the environmental footprint of any product that's going through the program. And I think the final one for sure would be it's that it's really built on reviewed data from the supply chain. So we're not using generic data. We're using data that is submitted and using products that have been submitted by the brands themselves. Plus, in addition to that, leveraging all of the chain of custody or the methodologies and all the standards that we accept in the program. So yeah, those three principles probably separate this program from other programs out there right now. Thank you for that one.
Of course, unmute. Thank you, Chris. And maybe while you're speaking, there was also a question on the timeframes related to the rollout of the transparency roadmap, which was not on the slide, probably with a purpose, but you can explain.
Yeah, I mean, I love a good roadmap with no dates on it, first of all. No, but there's a reason why there are no dates and why we're looking at it as a phased approach, because this is very new to us, right? So we're understanding the time and the resources, specifically the engineering resources also it takes to build a program like this in the background. But in addition to that, the conversation is changing, it's speeding up, and there's things like PEF, in which we were waiting for to drop the final piece, which is the product module, which now we're considering bringing forward in the program. So all I would say is that, it's happening over the next 2 years. For this year, we're specifically looking at FEM rollout and also starting to build the methodology for BRM, so the brand retail module. Those are the two big things in 2022.
Good. And following is more a policy related question. So I'm actually looking at Bente. And maybe Chris, you can add too, but let's start with Bente. How does the Higg Index transparency program align with current or upcoming regulation?
Chris, do you want to first take?
Yeah, I can take that first part, because
okay.
all I would say is that I rely heavily. Well, we can't be experts in every topic, right? And we rely heavily on our ecosystem, and the Policy Hub. Bente is here to stay close to that discussion, and therefore all we can reassure the people that are a part of the program is that, as legislation changes, that the program and the methodology will develop to be in line with any future legislation. But maybe Bente, you can talk a little bit about, what are the next steps around PEF? Let's talk about that. That might be a good one.
Absolutely. So PEF, the product environmental footprint, is a project that the Commission has been looking on. So the European Commission has been looking at for a long time. The aim of the EU authorities really is to develop one methodology to calculate the environmental performance of a garment and footwear. So I'm really talking about anything from t-shirts to jeans to socks. And the intention of the Commission is to leverage this methodology that is currently under development and actually will be finalized in Q4 2023 to leverage this in upcoming legislation. And here, one specific piece of legislation is interesting or of relevance, and that's substantiating green claims, which will use the PEF as a basis to substantiate any claims a company wants to make about their products. We have been waiting for this legislation, or the draft actually, to be on the table already on the 30th of March, but now there are some delays. So 20th of July, for anyone who's interested in that conversation, is the day to mark in your agendas. And then we will still look into 1.5 years of discussion within the EU legislative bodies until we have an improved legislation to be implemented, let's say, as of 2024. I think this would be the timeline we're looking into.
Thank you, Bente, for those clarification and this background. I'm just taking a look at the time because I know that some of you also need to hop off to another OECD side session in a few minutes. Maybe we take one more for Chris. Chris, how affordable are the tools to implement transparency?
Great. Yeah, great question as well. Right now, the only real requirement is to become an SAC member. So to be really transparent, there is no pricing scheme around it. There could be in the future as we work on that and scaling this up. At the moment, there's no fee in joining the program. So I would just say, just reach out to me and we can take it from there. Looking forward to having that discussion, no matter where you are on your transparency journey.
Thanks, Chris. And then maybe I take 30 seconds to also address one question which relates to whether manufacturers can be part of the SAC. Absolutely. We have, as members to the SAC, brands, retailers, and manufacturers. And interestingly enough, in the panel, you saw two manufacturers, Rakhil and Marie, who were definitely talking about the manufacturing view and experience on transparency. Why would a manufacturer want to become a member of the SAC? Well, this is not to do a sales pitch, but clearly there is a big interest in the convergence of the industry around a common set of tools, which are the Higg tools. And so it helps to reduce multiplication of audits. But also what we are pushing for very much in the SAC is equal partnerships between manufacturers, brands, and retailers. But if you want to know more, we would be happy to set up a call and talk this through. Well, good. I think we've come to the end of this session. And of course, again, an appreciation to everybody who contributed to this, Chris, Sophia, Bente, but also our panelists, Rakhil, Marie, and Delphine. And for you participants to joining us, and we're looking forward to continue this journey for accelerated impact through transparency. Thank you very much, and I wish you great and fruitful other sessions of the OECD Due Diligence Forum. Have a really good week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.